recently, as I've browsed around different mythical subjects on the internet and just been looking into different things, I've kind of seen a lot of people express derision at Christianity, especially coming from the, I guess, I don't know, again, like people who are interested in earth-based spiritualities or whatever. People seem to have a lot of pent-up anger at Christianity as like a religion and an institution. And for a lot of people, I think mythology and associated spiritualities are kind of like an expression of that anger or rebellion, even if they wouldn't consciously say so themselves. I think a lot of people would find that kind of disagreeable, but I think it's probably because it hits a little too close to home, or like to being truth, that, you know, they kind of wear it like a label so that they can piss off Christians. And as like a broader topic, there's actually a lot of people out there who spend a significant amount of time or invest a lot of their identity in their like resistance to Christianity specifically, kind of like Abrahamism, but mostly Christianity. There was more of it in the early 2010s, like the new wave atheism type stuff, which if you really broke it down was kind of like a Christian heresy, because they would express support for atheism, but whenever they would talk about God or any conception of God, or like basically the thing they were railing against was Christianity specifically, if you really boiled it down. Some of them would target Islam maybe, if they're a little more edgy. And the reason I say it's kind of like a Christian heresy is because their concept of the thing they were fighting against was Christian, if that makes sense. So like this God that they were saying didn't exist was very Christian. It was like there was never any other conception of deity out there. So whenever they would say like, oh, I disagree with religion, I don't like religion, if you really listen to what they're talking about by religion, they meant like Christianity. So anyways, a lot of people are like into paganism for similar reasons to resist Christianity. So I think there's, because of that, a really big kind of like trend of acting like everything that ever happened negatively in maybe specifically European history wouldn't have happened if Christianity didn't come about. And I think that's kind of like quite a strong myth that's prevailing these days, is like, yeah, the myth of the degenerating Christianity. In my view, the advent of Christianity is probably, as in Europe, as the main religion of Europe, is probably one of the most complex events in human history, at least, yeah, recorded history. There was so many reasons intertwining for why it was a successful takeover of Europe religiously. Everything from the infrastructure built by Rome to the economic and social conditions created by the Roman system, to the similarities and pre-Christian contact that already existed between Hebrew worldviews and mythologies and Indo-European worldviews and mythologies. In the Catholic and Orthodox Bibles, for instance, you won't find this in the Protestant Bibles, there's the Book of Maccabees, which documents Jewish interactions with the Greek state of Sparta. And in that book, they actually identify one another as kin, saying they're both seeds of Abraham. So the linkages between Hebrew mythos and European mythos, they run a little tighter than people like to imagine. Christianity is not as foreign to Europe as people now conceptualize it. And this helps explain partially the swift adaptation in Europe. Of course, some of the earliest and most enthusiastic adoptees of Christianity were Germanic tribes. The Arian Christians, or the Arian brand of Christianity, became very popular amongst the Vandals and the Goths. And it seems quite likely by their expression of Christianity, which was very militaristic, and their societies were very militaristic, which maybe doesn't square up with a lot of people's modern view of Christianity. So it seems quite likely that to them, as it was presented to them, Christianity wasn't that foreign to these warriors. It fit into their worldview neatly. And their early depictions of God, the Father or the Son, are very similar in conception to their earlier views of Odin. So the long beard, white, kind of like a sky father, like a Zeus-looking figure. And so, yeah, especially under the Arian guise, which for those who don't know, Arianism is an early Christian heresy meaning the majority of Christians now don't express that, essentially. That viewed God as not being a trinity, as being a total unity, which made it in a sense more similar to Islam, but it predated Islam. And so the Goths and Vandals basically took their earlier conception of a sky father and totalized him and made it the Christian God. And they took that on quite readily and happily. So this image that some people have of, monks with partially shaved heads carrying wooden crosses and beating innocent pagan villagers over the head until they're bloody or convert is kind of not exactly always true. It definitely happened here and there. Maybe not exactly as I just artfully described, but oppressive and forced conversions happened, absolutely, sometimes on societal scales. But there was also a very long, protracted period of complex mixtures of beliefs. The conversion wasn't overnight, and it took centuries in some places. Some places there's evidence that there was pagan practices well into the 1600s, specifically in like rural Scotland and all that. So it was a complex process. And going back to what I said earlier about Rome's social conditions, Rome wasn't in a good state when Christianity came around. People weren't all happy, specifically lower classes. Rome, like societies of today, was a very complex society that had reliance on a complex hierarchy of producers and producees and laborers and machine owners. And so when this economy was functioning well, people were happy, and this is the famous quote, bread and circuses. But around the time Christianity came about, bread and circuses were not doing exceptionally well, and people were feeling squeezed by society. And so it's not hard to imagine why a radical new conception of how to structure things, in a heavenly sense even, would be attractive to a society that feels like the previous ideas are no longer working. Specifically in a society where their previous ideas are so key to that society's functioning. And by that I mean the Roman emperor was a god. The imperial cult had been growing in power unchecked for some time at that point. And so to be a Roman citizen was essentially to pledge allegiance to this deified emperor. And so there really was this idea, I think, that if you wanted to change that system radically, you had to change your kind of religious conception. I don't know if there would have been another way to really restructure things, at least in people's perception at that time. If you want a similar comparison to how important that Roman emperor system was to Rome and the way it was functioning, when the US defeated Japan in World War II, we're jumping across the earth here, but Japan also has an emperor. They debated killing the emperor of Japan because they viewed him as a war criminal. But they decided ultimately that they couldn't, because they knew if they killed the emperor, the whole system would just crumble. There wouldn't be a Japan. It would cause complete and utter chaos. And so, kind of similarly, in the Roman system, the emperor, the deified emperor, was core. It was the pillar of the system. And so when people got really pissed at that system, that's what they targeted. And so we have a lot of the Christian kind of damages against intellectualism, or the human intellectual property that we all should have inherited. So this is what people are mad at Christians for: the burning of the Library of Alexandria, amongst many other works of art and intellectual properties being devastated by Christian mobs. And that happened. And so people often deride Christians for that. And there's this idea, of course, that if this didn't happen, that we'd be somehow, I don't know, colonizing Mars or something. But people forget that given that you and I are normal citizens and not patricians or aristocrats, presumably, we would have been more likely in those mobs knocking noses off of statues than we would have been grimacing at it. Christianity was really popular and spread like wildfire amongst the plebs, the lower classes. And so it was like a socio-political religious movement. It was, screw you, Rome. We're not taking this anymore. It was more complex than just religious zealots who have too narrow a worldview to accept the previous art or like philosophies. And of course, that's to say nothing of the fact that Western Christianity would actually roll into itself a fair amount of art and philosophy from those pagan traditions. So obviously Christians weren't completely against it, which is kind of funny. People try and make those two arguments at the same time. That Christians simultaneously hated paganism so much that they like destroyed knowledge and art and culture in an effort to wipe it from the face of the earth. And then they also argue that Christianity like is a copy off of paganism. So you obviously can't have both. I don't think Christianity is either of those things. I think it's probably a little bit more in between, especially the Western expression. It took a lot of Greek philosophy, imagery, statuary, reliquary, and kind of rolled it into this new creation, which is unique. I don't think Western Christianity can be called entirely Hebrew or Jewish or entirely, Germanic or Romantic. It's a kind of a new conception. And it was radically new. And once it became part of Rome's established system, it provided a period of stability. So yet again, it's a little more complicated than just Christianity ended Rome, which is another thing people blame it for. So I literally had no script for this. I've barely sipped my coffee. But those were just some thoughts I had on that whole hatred people have for Christianity, for the religion of Christianity. Which, ironically enough, especially more towards the Enlightenment, it is Christian thinkers largely who kind of designed this whole system that gave me the free speech right now to talk without worrying about being punished for, not just supporting a state dogma. Is William Wilberforce a Christian who ended slavery in the Western world? So people are happy to enjoy the benefits of Christian thought, and they never really give them credit for that, give credit to the church for that, and then they're just as happy to pick apart every little niggle of like the wrongs that this specific religion has done, which there are a fair few. And I think it really does come down to like just being in this Western cultural moment where people are kind of like collectively a rebellious teenager. If you look at like our traditions and our stories as like being the wisdom, being like every one of your ancestors has written one sentence summing up the most important thing they learned in their life, going all the way back to the beginning of time, and you had that book and you decided to just take a lighter to it. That's like humanity right now. We're just like pissed off that we were born apparently, and very upset with every idea that got us here. That's how I feel. And we just think we can do everything a lot better. So I guess part of that is to just throw out the last 2,000 years of Western thought, which I'm not as keen to do. I'd like it to be a little more balanced. Maybe weed the garden instead of taking a flamethrower to it. So thanks for joining me for some coffee thoughts. I've been thinking of some shorts and stuff. Not like the ones I'm wearing, but like YouTube shorts that I'd like to do. So I've got a few ideas. I'll be around. Thank you for subscribing to any new subscribers, and thank you for sticking around to my old ones. This has been a Mythical Meanderings rambling video. Thanks for watching, guys. See you on the next one. Cheers.